Hello friends, and welcome back to the Mothership. Today we are smoking up this absolutely beautiful looking beef shank, also known as Thor's hammer. Let's get started. This is a 6-pound Frenched beef hind shank, also known as the Thor's hammer. Why is it called that? Well, because if you hold it like this, it looks like Thor's hammer. Now this is called a French shank because obviously they took all the meat down to the bone right here, which is called Frenching. And they left everything for us with all the connective tissue, the fat, all that fun stuff. But what we want to do here is take off some of the excess fat. So on this side, I can see a decent amount of hard fat. Looking at it from here, I can see it's almost an inch. So I'm going to pull that off just a little bit. Don't need to go crazy, but just like a brisket, I want to pull it down to about maybe a 1/4 inch, something like that. Now that we got that excess fat trimmed down, what we want to do is give it a good salting, guys. So standard rules apply for me, guys. That is 1 teaspoon of kosher salt to 1 pound of trimmed meat. Obviously, there's a huge bone in this sucker, which means that we are going to probably do less than that. So this is about a 6-pounder. I'm going to assume maybe half of it is bone. It's probably a little bit less than that. So anywhere between a ½ teaspoon to a teaspoon of kosher salt is what you're looking for per pound. Like I said, this is 6, so assume it would be 3. So do the math. Get as much salt on there as you want, but the point is we want to get all of our salt onto this animal, let it absorb, then we can move ahead with putting our rub on, and we know we have the exact amount of salinity in this sucker that we want. With our salt applied, what we want to do is put this onto a wire rack in the fridge, let all that salt absorb before we actually put the rest of our rub on. Alright, now our hammer has had time to have its salt absorbed, which means we are going to go on a heavy coat of black pepper, followed by some garlic powder. And then we're just going to keep flipping this sucker and doing this all over. There is a lot of surface area of meat, guys, so you know what, you can kind of go ham here. Now this is going to be a long cook tomorrow, guys, so I'm probably going to start early in the morning. So I'm going to finish up my prep tonight. Last thing to do, this is obviously optional, put some tin foil around the bone. Not necessary, but if you want to have that nice clean bone, so it looks a lot like a, a Viking meal, you want to put some tin foil around there. That will keep the bone protected, and it'll keep it nice and white. But this is ready. I'm going to put it into my fridge. It's going to stay there overnight, and then tomorrow morning it's going to go directly onto my smoker. Okay, it is the wee hours of the morning. I've had this on for about an hour, and I want to show you my setup. So here is our Thor's hammer sitting in there. I have it on the bottom rack because it won't fit, obviously, on my top rack. If you can fit on your top rack, that would be the goal. I have it in a pan because I want to collect any of the drippings. But basically what we want to do, if you're running on a pellet smoker, just run it at 180 degrees for, I'm going for about 3 hours. That'll get a whole bunch of smoke on there. If you're running on something like a charcoal grill or an offset, run it at whatever temperature you usually do. Probably 250 would work fine. But yeah, for pellet smoker, 3 hours, we just want to get as much smoke on there as possible before we bump it up to a working temperature. So I'm just going to close it and let it go. All right, about 3 hours in, we've been running this at 180. I think it's got a good amount of smoke. We are going to bump it up to about 250, and then we are going to run it until we hit the stall and we wrap it. Everything actually is kind of set right now, but I'm going to let it keep going before I do any spritzing or worry about anything like that. Internal temperature right now is about 90 degrees. We're something like 4.5 hours in, and I've begun spritzing it. I'm just using a light beer, guys. You can use whatever you want. You can use water, you can use apple cider. Honestly, anything. We just get a little liquid on there. Just make sure that your bark has set first, like mine has. And I just don't want it to dry out. Internal temperature for me is 145. I'm gonna run this to about 160, and then we're gonna wrap it. I will probably keep spritzing about every 20 minutes or so, something like that. We are about 6.5 hours in, and we have an internal temperature of about 165, which means that I think it's time for us to push this through the stall, and that means we're gonna wrap it. So let's take this inside and let's get into some wrap. Now in general, I'm a fan of using butcher paper instead of tin foil. Butcher paper allows it to breathe, which I think helps your bark a little bit. But to be honest, we're gonna be shredding this anyway, so the bark that we have on there is gonna soften up as it is, and wrapping this in butcher paper seems like something I don't even want to attempt because of the way it's shaped. So what we're gonna do instead is just use tin foil. Now, what I wanna do here is create like a little bit of a boat. Kind of like so. And then I'm gonna pour all the juices that have come out of it so far. And B, I'm gonna put some beef stock in. Now you don't have to do this. I plan to actually make some tacos out of this, some birria tacos. So we're gonna be making a little bit of a consume anyway. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of beef stock in. Of course I spill everywhere because I'm an animal. Now we're just gonna continue to cover it up. Just like so. I'm gonna put it back into my tray, and it's going back on the smoker. I'm still gonna leave it at 250, run it all the way through. Now we're just looking for that point where it all falls apart, which would be somewhere around 195 to 203, that area. Intermuscular stuff starts to break down above, you know, that 190, 195 area, so that's what we're looking for. So we're gonna put it in back on the smoker just like we did before, but this time it's gonna be all wrapped up. That should speed up cooking and get us to the finish line a little bit faster. Here we are, approximately 10 hours, almost on the dot, to be honest. And this is ready to come in. We are at 199 degrees internal. What I'm gonna do is take this and put it directly into my toaster oven, or I guess my regular oven in this case, because it's a little big. And I'm gonna let it sit there at about 140 degrees and let it rest for about an hour. A cooler would work, but the rest is gonna be really good for this. Helps everything come back together. Then we're gonna shred it and move on to seeing how he did. But rest this, guys, an hour, 2 hour or more. Honestly, hour is on the lower end. 2 hours is probably about what I would recommend. Let this rest at about 140 is probably good. A warmed up cooler, so you can put boiling water, really hot water into a roto cooler. Obviously get rid of the water, it'll be nice and hot on the inside. That works perfectly for this kind of meat. But yeah, this looks good. Let's get inside, let it rest. We'll come back when it's time to actually see how we did. Now that we have had a nice rest, it's time to get this sucker shredded. As you saw during my intro, guys, you aren't cutting this into steaks. This is a cut for shredded beef. The bone came right out, which is fantastic. As you're going through and you're shredding it, if anything feels weirdly hard, that's intermuscular connective stuff. You don't want that. Or anything that looks like that, pull that out too. There's some gunk in here you just don't want to eat. And in general, it should pull apart amazingly. The smell is fantastic too. Now, some people like those funky gadgets. They got those claws and stuff you can buy at the store. Not necessary, guys. Honestly, get yourself some gloves if you want to, or just get a couple forks and just go to town. You shouldn't need any sort of ridiculous equipment to pull anything, whether it's pork or it's beef. That being said, if you like yours, just keep doing it. I'm not gonna tell you what to do. Now, the rule of thumb for pulled meats, guys, for me is if it doesn't feel appetizing, it's probably not gonna taste appetizing. So anything that's like overly, I don't know, squishy or hard or gross like that, don't even bother, pull it out. You sometimes find pieces like that in pulled pork. Definitely find it in chins of cow or pigs. Get all that stuff out of there, and you're left with just some beautiful looking shredded beef. You can see we've obviously got some really nice smoke rings on there, guys. You can see all this. I mean, look at that. That looks amazing. But yeah, this is pulled, which means I think it's time to give it an old-fashioned chomp, guys. Let's see how we did. Now, like I said before, although it looks fantastic as Thor's hammer, really, you can't cut steaks off this. It's not going to be good. This is really a shredded meal. And to be honest, the price of these beef shanks has gone up significantly in the last 5 years or so. So this has become a very expensive shredded beef. You're doing it for the spectacle. The taste is fantastic, obviously, but you're doing it for the spectacle of having such a cool, cool cut of beef. Now that we've got the beef shredded, I'm gonna take the liquid that was in our wrapping. It's not just the stuff that we put in there, it's also some of that fat that was rendered out. And I'm gonna add a bunch of it, if not all of it, into our meat here. It's gonna get a whole bunch of that fat added back in. And then before you serve it, just mix it together. But let's see how we did, guys. I am starving. It looks fantastic. Got a really nice smoke ring on there. It smells really, really good. Let's give it the old-fashioned chomp. Can't beat that, guys. Shredded beef, perfect amount of smoke to it. Perfect flavor. This is a winner. If you guys have never tried smoking a beef shank before, I highly recommend it. If only for having a giant Thor's hammer on your smoker. It's a cool thing, especially if you have people over. It's a great conversation starter, and the resulting food is fantastic. Now, this did take 10 hours to cook, which is a little bit longer than I thought it would, given that my beef shank was a little bit on the smaller end. Mine was only about 6 pounds. Yeah, I've seen them go up to 10 pounds, but 10 hours is how long this took to cook. I started at 180 degrees for a couple of hours, then I bumped up to 250, And then when I decided to wrap it, I actually bumped it up to 275 to push it all the way to the very end, which is about 199 degrees Fahrenheit. Everything probe tender. You saw how easily that bone came out of there when I did my introduction, and it shredded super easy. Letting this rest for about 2 hours is the right move, guys. Lets all the juices recombine, lets everything kind of figure out where it needs to be, and it really does make your product a lot better in the long run rather than just jumping right into it, pulling it, and eating it. Now, as far as eating it, guys, it's pulled beef. You can do whatever you want. You can throw it into a macaroni and cheese. You can make sandwiches with it. We're gonna make tacos tonight. I've got some liquid. I'm gonna braise some of this meat in, and we're gonna make some birria tacos. It's gonna be fantastic. But now, all that being said, guys, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Have you ever cooked one of these? What do you think? If you haven't, let me know what your favorite cook is, or just let me know what you're cooking down below. But as always, guys, the most important thing is you get out there and cook something absolutely fantastic, and I'll catch you on the next UFO barbecue. Bye-bye.